And I'm imagining here, maybe in post-edit, we will come in on some like weird Eastern European, fucking music that sounds like it's like the Mayor Pete song, but with those with long and drawn out gypsy singing.
Just accordion high hopes.
Yeah.
A mournful High Hopes song.
It's the Gogol Bordello cover.
Low Hopes, 1904.
Hello. Hello. I can't do the voice.
Greetings.
And welcome to Pot Damn America, the Gothic Socialist podcast for los. I only know how to do it in Spanish.
No, just do it. Just finish it in Spanish.
Para los niños estúpidos.
Welcome.
For the stupid children. Hi, I'm Jake Flores. Anders Lee is here.
Anders Lee here.
All the way from DC. Alex Patak is here.
Hi, we're doing a book report. Hello.
We're doing a book report. And to help us with that, welcome back to the show. Special guest from Chapo Trap House, Matt Christman. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, this should be good. We are going to talk today about the Young Stalin, both the book and the person.
And the man.
This book, I feel like, went around on Twitter maybe like 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, that's
because
the
of
thing.
the cover photo.
Because of the cover, because he looks like a Bushwick guy.
I assumed that this book was a meme because the picture on the front is a meme, and so I messaged Matt being like, of course, Matt will know the meme book, and then he was like, no, I haven't read that. No one's read it. And I was like, oh, good point. So let's all read it.
Yeah.
And then we'll do it. Everyone's only seen the hot young Stalin picture where he has a cute scarf and blown back model hair.
Yeah, I feel almost weird talking about it because I guess I was also operating under the same assumption that, like, this is kind of, everyone already knows all this stuff. We all read all this or whatever because everyone has the core history of the Russian Revolution or whatever. But actually,
it's old.
This book was fucking crazy, and I think the sort of explanation of it by the author when he put it out, and it only came out in 2007, does sort of pose an argument that, like, yeah, no, most people probably don't know about, like, the early life of Stalin because all of this shit he's drawing from, all the documents, were declassified at some point fairly recently to where he was able to look at, all this just weird shit about the seminary school he went to and stuff.
He only just got his hand on the documents. No one had seen these documents.
So, I don't know. This book was fucking crazy. I'm really glad I read it. It was one of the funniest things I've read all year, which I didn't expect, just because Stalin's life was that of a Looney Tune or like a just a ridiculous.
He was a cartoon man. He was like Boris Badenov carrying around a big round black bomb with the fuse coming off of it.
Yeah. It was all like that specific era of like slapstick.
He technically did half of his antics before Bugs Bunny got to them. Because they're one-to-one, like escaping jail by wearing a dress and saying, hello, handsome, to the officer until you're allowed to leave. Like that just worked at the time.
Yeah.
That's all,
we'll get into
comrades.
that, but my only attempt at being smart about this book, I guess, or divining any meaning from it, I guess, is that for me, when I read it, I was immediately a little conflicted because reading a biography about someone who is such a seminal character in history to me is almost a little bit counterintuitive to having like, a big scientific, broad materialist understanding of what happened in history because, like, it's tempting to buy into sort of a short-sighted, like, then narrative and chalk up a lot of these crazy things that form the world we live in today to one person's eccentricities and to try to get really heavy into counterfactuals. What if Stalin didn't do this then or whatever? And it also, the book is written from somewhat of a, just a normie reactionary point of view. The guy the whole time in the book is kind of going like, isn't this crazy how normal this guy was before he became the evil Stalin we all know?
And thus his shadow grew.
Yeah, it's all framed in this conventional wisdom. And it's also like fixating this much on the personalities and the inner lives and qualities of these political figures there's a mirror of it in like what we're doing with these political candidates that are running for president right now, and that we're like looking at their their inner qualities and their stats or whatever and their personalities, and it all betrays like a bit of a misunderstanding of like just of historical analysis or whatever, or like what causes the world to be. Let me just get my point out.
Sure.
I'm completely done.
Do not interrupt, Jake.
No, sorry. I just want to get this out because I have a big but after this. But Stalin is a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, he's fucking weird.
And when I read about his early life, it reminded me a little bit of another biography I just read, which you can make an argument that this person's weird grievances and, inner turmoil did cross over into their political actions that affected the world. And that was Nixon Land. I just read Nixon's...
Another nasty little toad.
A biography of Nixon where, it goes through like just his weird shit where he was like mad at a few people he went to college with and then formed like...
The Franklins.
Yeah, and then he formed a gang of nerds.
The Orthogonians.
And you can pose an argument, you can draw a line between that and then, these grievances that he exploited later on when he was president and he was trying to manipulate, various people in his base and various grievances that they have. So with Stalin, you start off with this picture of how this weird kind of sociopathic fanatic was born. And there are parts of this book where like a Chechen guy pisses him off, and then like in the footnotes, the author, poses the possibility that this might be why he went on to deport all these Chechens later on when he was mad.
Well,
with
throughout
power.
the book, there are all these little notes. Whenever they talk about somebody who crosses him in any way, the author is sure to remind you in a footnote that they are going to get murked. Like, this guy thought that Stalin thought he stole 70 rubles from him that he was going to use to escape from Siberia. In 1937, he was shot.
Yeah. I remember that exact note. And to me, that almost reads like a short-sighted, like that's bad analysis. That's not a good take. But the fact of the matter is, Stalin had so much power.
Yeah, he was a unique individual in his ability to literally be the life and death over everybody. Nobody really had that kind of combination of control and access, where he could and he could like put out anybody's lights in the entire country that he ran. That's pretty unique. That's a degree unique of power.
And he often is compelled to.
Yeah, and so I guess this is my whole fucking thing for this episode. I guess is that's why actually a biography of him is kind of interesting, because this is a case where you can connect his specific little events that happened to him in his life and his specific little personal foibles to things that affected history. That's it.
I do think though that there is a materialist point to be pulled from this book. Whether or not it was the intent of the author, I feel like they make the case consciously or not, and it is this. I don't know. We could argue about whether it's correct, but I do think that it is materially based. It's like it's approaching history from a material perspective, and that is that the main argument that I think he's making, not specifically about Stalin, but about the milieu Stalin grew up in, is that the Bolshevik Party, when it came to power, was indelibly shaped by its experience as an underground terroristic political movement during this period,
Right.
And that the culture of paranoia and suspicion and absolute distrust that permeated those organizations never let up their hold on the party, even after they took power throughout all of the book became the Soviet Union.
Right.
And the point that where Stalin emerges is to say that because the mob, Stalin's job was basically a mob boss in the Caucasus during the 1905 revolution. So that type of person who thrives in that milieu is going to be the person who takes it over. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
Like he was the most mob-like guy for a system that ended up making everybody feel like that even after they took power.
That's why he was valuable, too.
That's the
Right,
systemic
he thrived,
explanation
yes.
of how this ball ended up at the end of the pachinko machine.
Exactly.
He's
why
also-
he ended up
he's a
in
made man.
charge.
Yeah, for sure.
And then why he governed the way he did once he was there.
Also,
He was good at existing in conspiratio.
And that's like the assumption that everybody is out to get you, because when you're in a clandestine organization like that, those sort of questions are life or death. If somebody is an informant, you might be dead, literally. But it's this thing where you have hegemonic power, individual betrayal can never be that existentially threatening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it doesn't require that sort of complete psychotic system response to it.
Right.
Because you've got control of the whole country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can kind of lighten up.
You're not working in a terrorist organization where half of the paid members are actually officially cops anymore.
Yeah, there's also kind of an interesting note to that, which is that, you know, even if you do achieve this absolute power where you can finally relax by climbing to the top of this crazy paranoid system within Conspirazia or whatever, you've destroyed your brain.
Oh, yeah.
By the time you get to it. So
absolutely.
You can't relax.
No.
It's like what posting is for us.
Yeah.
Doing terrorism was for them.
Yeah. You're like Gene Hackman at the end of the conversation, just ripping the fucking drywall off it.
Yeah.
I have one point to make before we get into the thick of things, which is another emphasis on the material angle of the book, which is the author is a historian, Simon Sebag Montefiore. He has a book on the older Stalin called Stalin, Court of the Red Tsar. And he's clearly not on team pro-Stalin, which is okay because he does such a good job fleshing out all the details in this book. And although he's going on this angle, kind of like a last podcast on the left, of the biography of what he considers to be a serial killer, it's also a fantastic counter-argument to the main thrust you have against you as a communist in America, which is, oh, you want America to be a communist. Do you want it to be a fucking beat-up shed like the Soviet Union was? But by reading this book and all of the Bugs Bunny shenanigans that go on, you realize, materially, you could never have another state that works the same way this state worked, in terms of just how things are run due to the rate of technology, due to the way things were set up then.
No, that's absolutely correct. Russia was the country that had a revolution in 1917 because it was the one country that was in Europe and was part of this, modern era where it had never had an industrial revolution. It had never created a middle class of any kind. It was purely just a mountain of peasants in a very thin strata of aristocracy.
Just people in the mud.
Yeah, and so what that meant is that there's what I think Marx didn't even anticipate, and what happened in Germany, the country everybody thought was going to have the revolution because it had the most advanced and most self-conscious working class. Problem is that creates incentives among people in the working class to get jobs, in the union bureaucracy or in politics, in the parliament. It creates its own it creates this class of people who emerged from the working class but don't have working class interests anymore. You know what I mean? Who've kind of been co-opted into the system.
Yeah.
Which is why when revolution came to Germany in 1917, the people who put it down were the socialists. Because they had so much buy-in in the system that existed. That never happened in Russia. The 20th century dropped in Russia's lap in the form of World War I, and on the lap of a feudal society, basically.
Right.
So there was no middle-class antibodies built up. So they could just take over the host immediately. And that had very specific consequences for the state that emerges from that kind of violent disruption.
Class interests. You can see a mini version of that kind of replaying whenever, a socialist quote-unquote candidate gets its way in the news now. Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, the entire media class of people who are well set up are not thrilled to see it. Now imagine everyone is literally like an uneducated cartoon farmer and is trying to overthrow everyone and chop their head off. You get that times 100. And that's what this wacky-ass book is about.
Yeah, and just to speak to Alex's point a little bit about how this could only happen also in this specific time, just outside of all the material historical stuff that Matt was describing, there also is just a specific level to which this guy Stalin was able to operate in that, I think the author points out at one point, if the people tracking him, if the Tsar's people had computers,
it would be
none of this would fucking happen.
Yeah.
But it was just the fact that they were keeping track of this dude that was just hopping all over the fucking map, jumping in and out of trains and boats and shit, wearing women's clothes, and they were using note cards.
Before at the turn of the century, being a criminal was so awesome.
God damn.
Because there was no way to catch you in any real sense. There's that John Mulaney bit about they find a dead body in the street, and the guy's like, hey, there's a bunch of the killer's blood here, and he just goes, yeah, gross.
Gross.
It means
Back
nothing.
to my hunch.
And they shoot the name of the gang sucking and
Yeah,
bullets
the
on the
sucking
wall.
game.
Yeah.
Better shoot our name in the side of the wall.
Yeah, but you're just like, oh, I'll just escape here. Because they didn't have any institutions, which means even though the Okhrana was a very relatively sophisticated operation, considering the time, it was still wildly understaffed and underpaid. So the idea that they're ever going to be able to cover a country the size of Russia, especially when they, at all times, like half of their dissidents were supposed to be in exile, but were in the process of escaping.
Right.
Meaning that there's no way you could know where they were.
Yeah, exile seems like it was just that they send you very far away under the assumption that you'll walk back.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Get outta
but
here.
it'll take a
Catch
while
you again.
because it's really fucking big.
It's literally adult timeout. They put you on adult timeout when you're bad.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like just think about it for a few minutes.
Although another pressing reality of the book is, so you hear all about how easy it would be to do crime and shit, and you're like, oh man, I wish I lived in 1890, and then you realize you would probably, if you are reading the book, just be dead.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you got any illness at any point in your life, I got whooping cough in October.
both of us had whooping cough.
You'd both be done for.
Yeah.
By the way, whooping cough is the only correct way to read this book. If you do not have whooping cough, you are not in the right mindset.
I mean, I'm a fucking C-section kid. I would not have even existed at all. I would have been like blown up on the fucking runway.
They
Absolutely.
wouldn't have let Anders exist back then.
absolutely not.
I-
Anders, you
either-
would be legally a horse.
Or he'd be their ruler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One
it
or
would
the
be
other.
cannon fodder, I guess.
Anders
But
would just be like a cool street guy.
plus, his dad was pretty gnarly as well. Like, not only did he'd have to fight off smallpox, but his dad would just beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. Okay.
His father's commitment to his son not being educated
Yeah.
is amazing. I mean, just to be that single-mindedly devoted, be like, my
Okay.
kid is never going to learn to read.
All right, let's just do this.
Yeah, let's get into the timeline because that character does rule and he'll come up like immediately.
We're going to talk about this extensively. Okay, so
All right, the young Stalin. Here we go.
my book report. All right. So we start at the beginning. We have Stalin-born Joseph Jugashvili. He's born in Georgia, in the Caucasus, in the town of Gori in 1878. And small, like, side note, the author puts at this part that immediately clarified everything for me, is if you're an idiot American like me and you don't know anything about European countries, he's like, if you don't know Georgia, it's just Italy but Slavic.
Italy, it's true.
It's
And
a
it's
passionate people.
The first culture to grow wine.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah,
also
I get it.
sort of far away from the rest of Russia where he would later live. Like, I think I read that where he lived in Georgia was closer to Baghdad than it was to St. Petersburg.
Yeah. And there's a lot of racism towards people from the Caucasus,
Yeah.
which he ends up, like, promoting when he's in power.
He's sort of like a Napoleon figure in that way, you know, from Corsica, way in the periphery of the French Empire.
At the end of this book, they're talking about how everyone in the Russian Revolution wanted to be Napoleon at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very good summary of the situation.
Yeah.
Napoleon complexicated.
He's born in Gori, and to give you the kind of idea of what kind of place Gori is, they have a holiday every year because it used to be a military training base where, like the Purge, once a year, all fighting is legal, and every man in the village goes out and fights in the streets, and all the priests are refs, and that just goes on until the swinging is done.
The referee priests, I should also note, are drunk.
Yeah,
It's
everyone
noted
is shit
in the
hammered.
book that if you need to get the rules worked out of a fight you're in, you grab a drunk priest who's just sort of standing in the middle of the town wearing like an orange vest or something, like the guy you go run to in laser tag to fix your pack.
It really does show you, though, that at that point, Georgia, which had been just incredibly buffeted by violence in the Middle Ages because it was at a strategic juncture, in the connected to the steppe region where all these fucking, Mongol hordes were running back and forth. They were invaded by the Mongols and the fucking Golden Horde and Tamerlane. About 200 years nonstop warfare. Now, that's a culture that has, like, collective PTSD, where you just got to rumble in the streets to get it out.
You gotta fight it out.
Yeah.
It's truly an anime town,
And I
you
mean,
gotta respect it.
it is crazy, but he describes young Stalin being like 10 years old and being in this town where, like, during this holiday you form teams and stuff. And it is brutal. And it is, for us to think about, like, a little kids doing that, it sounds crazy, but I remember being a kid. This sounds very fun.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah, that'd be
it
great.
kicks ass.
Remember King of the Mountain?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was so much fun.
It's like that, but with adults.
Dude, when I was a
They
kid,
could play.
at recess, we had a month-long just organized thing where we just threw rocks at each other. We just had a rock fight game, and someone eventually won. There was a whole bracket to it and shit. That shit has to kick ass for a young man. Also, it probably formed him into a bit of a monster, but pretty cool.
This is the one quote I took out here. In his childhood, this is his friend, the priest's son. Where is it? Charkviani. He says, referring to Stalin, "There's hardly a day when someone had not beaten him up, sent him home crying, or he hadn't beaten someone else up." And that is after he becomes crippled at a young age with a bum left arm.
He got hit by a horse cart.
He gets
phaeton.
He gets Bob doled because he later went on to keep a pipe in his. I think his right hand. Yeah, he would keep a pipe. in his right hand,
he
so
Bob
no one tried
doled
to
it up.
shake
Yeah.
And Bob Dole did the same shit with a pen.
When I
True.
was reading it, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be like a Frida Kahlo situation where there's this big defining injury, but it seems like it just made him kind of mad.
Yeah, he continued to fight his whole life just without being able to use an arm, which is some real boss shit.
The fact that he has one John McCain arm is something you forget early on in the book, and then later on you're reading about like just hundreds of bank robberies, and you're like, these people had no idea the guy couldn't use one of his arms when he pointed a gun at them.
Shoot him on the other side.
Yeah, literally just hit him on the right side of his head or whatever.
All right, let's get into the Freud stuff here. Okay, so he is born to Kiki Galadze and Beso Jugashvili.
Beso O'Rourke.
Who is a local cobbler with his own business. And they had tried to have several other children who all died of old-timey diseases immediately.
Yeah, of course.
And so when their third one finally comes out, they're like, this is our special boy.
We have a boy. He's so great. Look at him.
He's a stars are in his eyes.
And
Make him shoes.
And on that moment, his father looked in his eyes and said, I swear to you, son, you will never learn to read. I will die before I let you open a book.
His mother Kiki worked around town. She did cleaning at the.
She worked around town, all right.
Yeah,
According to some of the rumors that they talked about. In the book.
Right.
She was doing work at the police chief's house, Damian Davrichoui. There was another man, Koba Ignatashvili, who was known as the local wrestler and innkeeper. Who delivered the baby, and she also hung out around the priest, Father Charkviani, a lot.
Hung out.
And all of them might have been Stalin's father, and no one knows.
Yeah. There was just this local strongman, which is so hilarious that that's even a thing in this time period, as every town just has like...
You had to have a big, strong guy.
I am strong Koba Ignatashvili, and I assist in making Young Stalin.
Remember, entertainment had not been invented yet.
Right.
So, like, hey, who's the strong guy in the town? That's entertainment.
People love that strong guy.
That's a season of prestige television.
Watching him pick up a cow?
Yeah, it's like,
my God.
Who could pick up a larger child?
Yeah, it's 3 weeks before the child fights come back, so now, it's when we watch Koba Ignatashvili pick up things.
Koba, he is so strong, he reach into any woman and grab out the baby.
Well, this town, just the entire time I was reading about it, it reminded me of like a Zelda game where there's just these vaguely Eastern European
you just hear
people
like flute pipes.
You get a quest from me. I need you to pull an egg out of someone's head.
I did imagine all the bars that he goes to, it's just on the top of barrel heads. And they're like, they're elf wenches serving them mead.
So the gossip that this kid could have had 3 to 4 fathers is immediately all anyone in the town can talk about.
My 3 to 4 dads.
And in kind of a heartbreaking way, his supposed father, Beso, immediately goes insane with jealousy.
You will not read. My child will not get educated.
Well,
I will kill him first.
Beso, the cobbler,
Beso O'Rourke.
Beso O'Rourke, who at first is sort of this working guy.
The swearing cobbler.
Successful.
He's proud. He makes fucking hella shoes. He's got this kid with his wife who was supposed to be barren, and
then
everything's going great. But then suddenly he seems
Barleycorn.
to realize that he's being thrice cucked by a strong man, a cop, and a priest.
Right. He's
like
just set
the
up to
start
every
of
joke.
Yeah, terrible joke, and it's on him. And so he just starts getting shit-faced.
Yeah.
He just becomes dedicated to alcoholism.
In a way that we have to respect in this day and age. He drinks day and night until he loses his business and starts wandering around town, developing the official nickname in the town of Gori as Crazy Beso.
Crazy Beso, half off all appliances.
All the shoes.
All the shoes.
Wacky waving, Crazy Beso, inflatable flailing tube man. He's just fucking, he's out there, he's like breaking windows, he's just showing up at these people's houses being like, I know you fucked my wife. There's only like 100 people there, so they all talk about it.
And
We can't make him Borat.
he beats up poor young Joseph.
I'm sorry, these people are Borat. What are you talking
It's
about?
very boring. No, he got beat up by his dad a lot.
So this is another thing about his forming brain and him eventually sort of becoming someone who smashes the idol of Christianity and replaces it with the idol of Marxism. And there's something arguably Freudian going on with the fact that he's got this very complicated like guilt and pride thing going on with his working class dad, who he, at first he's kind of ashamed of, but then like when he becomes like a tanky teen in the seminary school, he sort of has a change of heart. He's like, oh, it's actually really cool that my dad's, makes shoes all day, but then his dad's crazy and
His dad keeps going, get out of school.
Right.
Stop being educated. We do not want you to know anywhere. I hit you in the head until you forget letters.
he's probably internalizing also in his understanding of like whether it's good or bad to be poor, this weird shit where his abusive father is like, go to school.
You only do shoe. You work with me in basement with shoe. You never go outside. It is just for shoes.
Yeah.
Your life is shoe like mine. I just love the idea of a parent who is like, yes, I would be incredibly jealous if my kid got to experience anything better than I did. I insist that my kid have the exact same shitty life as me.
And he takes out all of the cuck rage directly on poor young So-So, which is what Stalin is called almost the entire book by everyone. As a baby, he's at one point thrown on the ground, and it like breaks half his bones. He's just beat up every day, every time he sees his dad, until his dad eventually, in a drunk rage, breaks all the windows at the local tavern and stabs the policeman with a cobbler's tool.
Oh, dear.
And is forced to leave the village.
There's a sad passage in, I read the Court of the Red Tsar, and there's a very sad passage where So-So is getting 5 rubles a month for being a choir boy. I don't know what their priorities were in that village, but he was getting paid. And he's walking home, and his dad just comes up and says, "Young man, you've forgotten your father. Give me at least 3 rubles. Don't be as mean as your mother." And then Stalin says, "Don't shout. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." And so he just like goes away, and then he never sees him again, and he dies.
He takes his singing rubles.
Yeah,
That's right.
Crazy Beso is either the Cobbler, the Adam Sandler movie, or
Did
or
you see that movie?
I fell asleep Netflixing it.
That shit's wild.
He's like a magic shoemaker.
That's the first twist. First twist is that he has a magic machine that allows him to live in the shoes of anyone whose shoes he wears. And then at the end, you find out that his father, who you thought had like walked out on them years ago, is actually part of a long tradition of superhero cobblers who use their abilities to fight crime.
This is why Crazy Beso is so crazy, because
Yes.
he's trying to explain the...
Spoiler alert to
his
anyone who
melted
hasn't
brain.
seen The
Get out of
Cobbler.
school and learn to cobble shoe.
But that is a mind blower. Highly recommended.
yeah.
Directed by the guy who directed the Oscar-winning film Spotlight.
Jesus Christ.
I think he did it
insane.
back to back. I
Power
believe
of
those were
Sandler.
like
Wow.
in order the films that he directed.
Well, maybe he knew something we didn't about Crazy Beso.
Other
I was
important.
going to say the other vibe I get from is Al Bundy, because he's like, he's angry that he's a
Yeah.
I
shoe-
hate life. Life hates me. With the shoes? The shoes?
He's a fucking
Perfect.
shoe salesman, and he beats someone with that thing you measure your foot with in
Yeah.
Foot Locker.
Those are sharp.
I bet they are.
And Kiki's like, Beso, come on, let's have sex. He's like, no. How about no?
No, Kiki.
That was a good show. I watched the hell out of that show.
That show fucking ruled. Honestly,
really great.
might do an episode about that show, because
I haven't seen it.
I have some.
I'd
It's
love
like,
to see it.
I guess I'm a sexist, but if I'm talking early 90s working class sitcoms, give me Married with Children over Roseanne.
Well,
I'll say it.
Scandalous.
I think
I'll say it.
Not to go off on a tangent here, but I think that Married with Children achieved what Roseanne attempted in that it attempted to be an anti-sitcom, and it attempted to do what like sitcoms are propaganda for the suburban weird wife and a kid dream. Roseanne was like, what if we show actual working class people? Whereas Married with Children created a full-on inversion, like black comedy, where it's like, no, this is what life actually is like in this situation you're trying to trick people into buying into. Oh man, okay, yeah.
I'm gonna go
be
on
a
a
different
limb.
episode.
I'm going to go on a limb and say The Simpsons counts, and then
Yeah, Simpsons is in that
that's
tradition.
for sure good. But I'd still say Simpsons number one, obviously, but then I go Married before Roseanne.
And Beso would be Milhouse's dad.
Okay, let's get back to Stalin.
You can borrow a feeling. You can, in fact, borrow a ruble of feeling.
He's recording on like a harp.
Kiki is the hot blue-haired cartoon. So here's something you have to understand about his little nesting period here, is that in his early life, he knew nothing but pain. Not only is he on part of the, like, mob-style child fights in the street, he gets a very dangerous case of smallpox when he's 6, and he's hit, as we said earlier, by a carriage at the age of 10, goes into a coma, and then just like can never use one of his hands again. So it's somebody who's very used to pain, getting it and giving it to other people, and then at the age of 12, his entire class is forced to watch a public hanging so that they don't rise up against the state. And that radicalizes him to be a revolutionary for the rest of his life. And that is also how Lenin's brother was executed, which radicalized him.
Yes, it was indeed.
Shout out to Lenin if you're listening.
That was a turn of the century version of the thing where they make you go to the cafeteria and a local like wrestler rips a phone book in half. And like, don't do drugs, kids.
So
this man stole one muffin. Crack. They hang him.
he is a weird kid. They have this whole part where, like, for example, there's this picture on the back of the book of him when he's like 10 in this line of boys because he arranged a school picture at the age of 10, got everyone together and paid the photographer by himself to show off what a good choir boy he was.
He was a bossy little dude.
Which, history aside, is some real psychopath shit that you gotta respect.
That's some Mayor Pete energy, I think we can all agree. That's little Mayor Pete.
Yeah, this part of Stalin's life reminds me of this this guy I knew growing up who had like essentially a trap house run by like teens and tweens, and it was all run out of his grandmother's house, who was clearly just dying and senile and had no idea what was going on.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, his name was Greg.
A fucking Harmony Korine movie.
Yeah, but this guy who was like in ninth grade was able to
out. Fuck.
You would do shit and you'd go, Jesus Christ, how the fuck did you do that? You're 15.
You have a lot of get up and go.
Yeah.
So Stalin, he's got a lot of chutzpah. He's a young entrepreneur. He's very familiar with violence, and he also has the most beautiful singing voice anyone in all of Gori has ever heard.
The funniest thing to me about all this is the contrast between all the bloody knuckles and violence and abuse and like him kind of forming into this hard ass and losing his innocence and doing all these weird extracurricular activities, but then also voice of an angel and killing it in school.
Also, a actually quite talented poet, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
Nationally recognized
A nationally
poet.
recognized poet, someone who probably, if they'd committed to it, had been, because that was a time when poet was a job you could have.
Yeah.
You get a couple of sponsorships. You put out a monograph. You could actually make a living doing that back then, especially if you were in like a national mode where it's like, ooh, he's the new Georgian poet of the moment.
You get Nike supporting your rhymes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that makes me think. So obviously the two big antagonists in World War II are Hitler and Stalin, right?
Yeah.
They both were the children of distant, alcoholic, violent fathers and cloying mothers, right?
Yeah.
And they were both artistic spirits. Hitler, a painter, and Stalin, a poet. Stalin, according to this, was a much better poet than Hitler was a painter.
I believe
Because
it.
No one has ever
Yeah.
rated Hitler's paintings as anything above like hotel room level mediocrities.
Right.
Whereas
Hitler's thing is
he
just hand turkeys.
He was a yes, whereas Stalin was a genuine talent. So maybe that's why he won World War II,
Fair.
because he was better at his art than Hitler was at his.
Well, these like criterion we're describing of having the fucked up, overbearing mom and an
Yeah.
angry dad or whatever are, arguably overlapping in that those 5 big points that you take to get a serial killer.
Yes, the McDonald scale.
If they piss the bed, then
The homicidal triad.
they're right next to Ted Bundy or whatever.
Bedwetting, arson, and torturing animals.
Torturing animals.
Yeah.
Which it didn't
Donald
go
Trump.
into much of that. I mean, I don't know nearly as much about Hitler, but my general take from reading all the Stalin stuff is Stalin, even though he's very violent and kind of base, is also recognized as like a generational talent and genius. Whereas everything I know about Hitler is like, this fucking dumbass is on drugs.
No, they talk about how Stalin is an incredibly good student, even though he's a delinquent who's always in trouble
Yeah.
for doing like really violent like pranks that actually harm people and are dangerous. But he's still at the top of his class all the time. Hitler was absolutely a mediocre student
I
at
am
all times.
so fascinated with the seminary school chapter of
Yes.
of Stalin's life because it is just Hogwarts.
It's wonderful.
It is, yeah. It's like a dark Hogwarts.
He just has this like headmaster that he calls the black spot that hates him.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, like all these things describe maybe the origins of a super creative thinker, a super atypical thinker. You could maybe say that that's why like Hitler and Stalin are both fucking a little bit wacko and applied it to all these things or whatever. But he was not a fucking. He was a geek, not a freak. He
Yeah.
was not a dropout. He
No.
wasn't trying to leave the seminary school. He was trying to use the concept of education. Like he was like, "Fuck this! I don't want to read about God anymore. I want to apply this to like
Wanted
Marx
to use
and
it as
shit."
a weapon.
Yeah.
His education is the only reason he could cut it as a revolutionary. So he has all this like chutzpah in his hometown as the singing boy with the golden voice or whatever. But there's nothing for him there because, again, this is just mud huts. So what they do is they get the whole town to chip in money to this poor woman who's been abandoned by her drunk husband. And they
You do not educate my boy.
who was just out on the outskirts of town, like shaking his fist at
You
them.
do not educate my son. He must not know anything I don't know.
And because no one knows who his father is for sure, they just say he's the priest's son, so he gets to go join the seminary school. And that's when his magical boy adventure really begins. That's where he's recognized for his beautiful voice.
This is where he's kind of turns into the Harry Potter of Georgia.
He starts writing his poetry as Sosello, the famous poet. Becomes nationally recognized. He's very religious until his first year at seminary school, where it's very what's the word, rebellious to read books back then. I guess.
Yeah, the thing that got everyone in trouble was reading books.
Yeah.
You better not be reading books over
It
there.
was such a stultifying, tyrannical intellectual milieu that one of the quotes that I remember is someone said that seminary made more atheists than all of the secular colleges in the world.
Yeah, that is also just true of any Catholic school, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
And especially this one.
Well, what's interesting about that to me is that there's something that my friend Louisa, who's their podcast, talks about a lot, which is like different types of iconoclasts and like the concept of people having idols and then wanting to either become a type A iconoclast, which is someone who smashes idols and then sort of becomes a no sacred cows comedian type person who's like, don't worship anything. You've had the wool pulled over your eyes. A lot of those types of people,
The clown.
a lot of those types of
the
comedians
noble clown.
are ex-religious people. Like
Yeah.
Kurt Metzger, like famously describes himself as having escaped a doomsday cult because he's from like a fucking weird small Christian thing or whatever. But there's a second type of iconoclast, which is someone who smashes what did I just say, idol, and then immediately replaces it with another thing. And so with Stalin's forming years in the seminary, I think what's kind of interesting is that he, within 1 year, figures out that God isn't real. But at first, he goes into the thing wanting to be a priest and wanting to buy into Christianity and sing all these songs or whatever. And as he goes on his little Harry Potter adventure and discovers these forbidden texts and starts organizing, reading these books. He seems to be somebody who replaces the concept of an explain everything ideological lens that they're trying to teach you, which is God, with just that same thing with Marxism, which you can make the argument, and people often do, that Marxism is the only ideology that really fits on all lenses like that, and is whatever the immortal science,
the sweet science it's called.
like boxing.
It's the boxing of thought.
But that's what makes him such a powerful fanatic. That's what makes him probably on some level, like in his early teens, a fucking crazy manic online tanky type person who is like, we got to read more and more of these books or whatever. And I would say also combined with these serial killer origins we're sort of examining in his his fractured personal life, creates in him this fanatic that's being portrayed in the book later on, even in that, like, one thing that he has in common with a lot of his other big theory heavy revolutionary contemporaries is that they abandon their personal lives and often will fuck women and go, listen, I would stick around, but the revolution is more important.
Yeah,
they become
she's their main woman,
pilgrims of this thing. So in this short time he spends in the seminary school, he manages to become like a different version of the priest that the school is trying to produce.
Right, and sailors do this with the sea.
Well, that's a lot of that is because the model of the revolutionary that most young Russians at that time period followed was the one from Chernyshevsky's "What Is to Be Done."
Yeah,
that was the foundational text that gave the blueprint for how you are to behave if one is to be a revolutionary. Lenin adored it. He wrote a book with the same title as a reference to it. Stalin loved it. And it's because it tells you to be like this revolutionary aesthetic. And it's very similar to being like a traveling priest or something. Like you are a crusader. And it is like tinged with like religious devotion and self-mortification. Because you have that same, even though it's a materialist religion, you're still saying forgo material goods in pursuit of revolution as a higher calling. Like that is spiritual. Like, that is a mystical communion.
He's extremely devoted to his craft, but he's just in trouble the entire time he's at the school. And it's not trouble like the way your American brain is designed to think. Like if you're a bad boy at a high school in America, you're like probably dealing drugs.
Yeah.
Or you're like a hooligan for the hockey team or something. Every time this guy gets thrown in school jail by the black spot, it's for either reading the wrong kinds of books or going out and organizing workers at the factory, which is crazy you can do at like 17, but apparently it works if you get over there and tell them you know how to read books.
Well, see, this is something I was thinking about today because we're now, I think, the 50th anniversary of Fred Hampton's murder, and like it feels like that's the most dangerous thing for the sort of the capitalist state is to have a clandestine organization, outlaws who are armed and also reading shit like Marx, and we don't really have that in the same way. But that's like
no, because they killed Fred Hampton.
Right.
We had one and they murdered them. Yeah. Which is something this society failed to do because it was a bunch of peasants and fucking fancy lads.
If you think about it, if they had, instead of sending these guys to an awkward vacation home in Siberia that they would be able to escape whenever they wanted to, if they just shot them, how would you have had a revolution? It's an open question.
Which is also something that Stalin learns very well, because when people are in trouble for him later, they do not get to go on vacation.
Oh no, he understands. It's like you fucked up by not pursuing ultimate security by way of fucking murking everyone.
You played yourself.
Oh, worried about do. Hey, your kid, what up? Remember when I used to be dope? Remember Judgment Night? Anyone? It's a great movie, even better soundtrack. One of the first rap rock.
Rap rock.
It was the first time rap met rock.
Rap Rock Obama?
Yeah, it did. Rap Rock Obama.
Rap Rock Obama.
Wait, who was Judgment Night again?
That's Dennis Leary, Jeremy Piven, I think Stephen Dorff, Cuba Gooding Jr. It's a RV full of dudes is going to fight night in Chicago, but they take a wrong turn and they witness gang leader Dennis Leary murdering one of his underlings, and then they chased him through like the industrial hell of South Chicago. And yeah, that's the movie.
And there's rap rock.
Oh yeah, I
On the
watched that. I
soundtrack,
used to work
yes.
at a video store.
I've
We
never
watched
heard
that.
of this.
It rips.
All right, I'll have to check it out.
Hey, you guys have read the book more recently than me. Is the seminary school in Tiflis, or does he move to Tiflis?
No, he moves to Tiflis to go to the seminary school.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
So-
he leaves Gory.
He leaves
Or
his
to go
like
to the Tiflis. Yes.
backwood home to go to kind of
the
the
big
happening-
city.
the big city in Georgia, which
Yeah.
again is Italy but in Russia.
and like southern Italy at that. Not like Renaissance city-state ass northern Italy.
You can
No.
replace Marone in a lot of the
peasant
speeches.
ass Calabria ass in southern Italy.
So he's eventually thrown in jail at the end of his seminary school for doing organizing and doing praxis. And that's where he kind of, forms his adult self and becomes a made man. He officially joins the Social Democratic Labor
Social
Party.
Democratic Labor Party, baby.
This hot and upcoming.
It's so
org.
hot right now. Social Democrats, so hot.
Anyone who's anyone is in the
oh my God.
RDSLP.
Oh my God, you're still with the SRs? Oh my God, honey. The SRs are so 2 years ago.
How provincial.
Oh my God.
Why don't you S my D and join the SDs,
Ah.
bitch?
So he's been in jail. He's done his bid. He gets a cool new look. He's always wearing a fedora now. Describing adult Stalin, I feel like deserves a minute because he is a fucking dude. Like he defines a generation. He's always got a fedora. He's got a scarf. This is where he looks like the guy on the front cover of the book.
The hipster that every girl fell in love with.
He has like one pair of pants.
Yeah, this is the era where Bushwick Stalin existed.
Yeah, he's just out at bars named like the Broken Kettle.
Yeah.
And he slays. And why wouldn't you? But the thing to remember is that that's a very old photograph. It's not a lot. Doesn't have a lot of definition. Stalin did have very heavy smallpox scarring, so it was sort of an Edward James almost situation. So maybe you still like that, maybe you don't. Just you have to figure that into your equation.
Oh right, the photograph had like a filter.
Yeah.
like
Yeah, the filter of it being an old timey photograph with like a flash pan full of igniting powders.
yeah.
The filter is time.
Yes.
This is the part where we're going to do probably the best thing in this whole episode, which is read all of Stalin's nicknames.
Fuck yeah.
As he described, he is
This
called
book was so hard to read. I just want to point this out. It's actually a pretty quick read, and it makes a lot of sense. But one thing that slowed me up a lot is that everyone in Russia at this time has minimum 10 names. And then Stalin is like, I'm going to be the most of these people. So he has like 30
And it doesn't
names.
help that every Georgian their name ends in Vili.
Oh, they're all
So
Ashvili.
it's impossible to keep them separate.
I cannot tell you the name of anyone in this book.
It's like everyone's Vili.
I am reading off a document.
It's Vili, 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 Vili. I hate that shit.
Yeah.
Get a new name.
Get a new way to put your name together.
All right, so he's called the Pockmarked because he
He's got
He has
he's got those
pockmarks.
Edward Chase almost marks.
he is Soso. His poet version is Soselo.
How would you like to have the nickname mediocre? How's
So-so.
how is he? How's that you guys really? So.
It is our child, Joseph.
The pockmarked one, slightly
Ouch.
different. The Loper, because he has also a limp.
Yeah.
The Staggerer.
Also limp.
The Caucasian, because he eventually moves to Russia, and then they're like, "Who's this fucking
He's
guy?"
pretty fly for a white guy.
Because he goes to Def Jam comedy night
You know
one
what?
night.
It's surprising they didn't game him. You know what's the most common slur for Caucasians in Russia now?
What's that?
I don't.
Black asses.
Yep.
So people from like Georgia, Dagestan, and Chechnya and stuff, they get called black asses.
Yeah.
That is so confusing.
It really does show you like the will towards racism, no matter what. It's like, how are we supposed to distinguish? We're all incredibly pale. We're the most pale people on earth.
Look
Yes,
at his ass.
but your ass is black.
I
I know
see
you
your
got
ass.
a black ass in those pants. I
Get
know
back
it.
to Georgia with that black ass.
I know you sit in dirt.
Okay, anyway, there's a lot more of these. David, don't know what's up with that. The Priest, Koba, which means bear. And then he mixes them a lot. Like one, he's like Koba Kato, which is the name of his first wife. He's the priest, Father Koba. Like people knew he was a priest because he went to the seminary.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he would go around doing underground shit, and they'd just be like, "Who's that roaming priest?"
One of the things that I'm sure just made sense at the time that is completely alien to me is that when he was writing letters, he would use a pen name, and as an affectionate thing to do to his first wife, Kato, he would sign his name Koba Kato.
Yeah.
So like there was this weird thing where if you were like in love with your wife, you would be like, my name is Stephanie now, right?
Yeah.
But then he like later on after she died, he like was dating some other woman and was like, I like you so much. I'm not Kato anymore.
Name change.
Now
Kato
I'm
is
you.
over.
And it was, or Stefan, rather. 'cause
Friendship
her
with
name
Kato has ended.
It's just
Now
such
Stahl is my only friend.
it's such a weird reverse of the patriarchal, like, you take my name thing. It's like, now I'm Megan. Because I'm your boyfriend.
I guess, yeah, Stalin didn't care about gender roles, and I'm here for it.
I am here for it.
Except in all the ways he very much did care about gender roles.
Oh, well, yeah.
My favorite one, the milkman. Did I say that yet?
The
Milkman, he delivers.
Because he always delivers.
He always delivers.
He's there in the morning.
He was like
Any
Karl
father with some
Malone.
illegitimate children, probably.
Yeah, also so many children.
That would actually kind of fit, yeah.
And then, there's like another 400 of these. But eventually, this part was interesting towards the end of the book. When he starts calling himself Stalin, it's because he publishes this very influential essay around the time of the 1917 revolution, or like up towards there. And in that, because he was just switching his name every time, that time he was Stalin, and then that one took off. So he's like, yep, I'm Stalin. That's me forever now. Name yourself by your first hit.
Oh, he's like Lil Nas X.
Yeah.
That guy used to be like an Instagram.
He was the
influencer.
fat
He
Jew
was like a
before.
fat Jew type guy,
Yeah.
and then when that fucking song took off, he changed, scrubbed everything, and now he's just, I'm Lil Nas X. I've been
I
this
have
forever.
always been Lil Nas X. He's the Jerry Adams of rap.
Yeah.
I've always said that. So my point is, my man had a lot of names, and he's going town to town trying to organize for the party. He eventually... So he doesn't, like, have a house in this time period. He's just showing up at whoever's, like, supportive of him, because he's a very charming man.
Oh, he's
and
a
he'll stay with
train
their
kid.
family.
He's a Johnny Appleseed of revolution.
He's a crust punk during this time.
He is just a crusty punk, but who owns a fedora.
He's living on my couch. Breathing my
So
toilet.
he's like a third-way ska guy.
Yeah.
But he'll show up at your house if you've been supportive, and then he'll have sex with your daughter.
Absolutely. And your maid. And
your
maybe your mom?
Every woman there
I fucked your
loves
mom
him.
for you.
No, Stalin was...
You do dishes?
He did not leave a wife unfucked if he met them. That's astounding. Or a daughter or any ancillary woman.
It kind of makes sense that he does have like the Bushwick guy image, because he is like this,
He's that guy who he hits it and quits it on the fucking Tinder.
and he's both like sensitive and writing poetry. And,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And then just being like, bye-bye.
He isn't like a total douche. He is like a hybrid guy where he is clearly like capitalizing
doing
on
something.
this mystique to fuck all
There's
these women.
There's a rumor that he was Nadia's dad, because he did have a thing with her mom, but it
Yes.
was the timeline didn't work out precisely.
Yes,
but
he did, though, have an affair with the mother of his second wife.
Which, boy, so yeah, she eventually kills herself. Although I don't think that
Yes.
happens in this book.
Yeah,
But
no, that's later.
sad. Pour one out for Nadia. But he'll fuck everyone in your family, and then his attitude about it at the same time is the best part, because he doesn't apologize. Like, you'll go up to him and be like, Did you fuck my daughter? And he'll be like, I'm very busy right now. I can't talk about that. I actually have to go stay at another house until tomorrow, or I'll be back fucking your daughter. And at this time, he meets his wife, Kato, and she is the daughter of one of his like closest pals when he's in Tiflis. And she is like a very sensitive girl who like takes to him, and they very slowly build up this romance over time. And when he's thrown in jail, he'll sweet talk the policeman into letting her in every night, or he'll like crawl
Epstein
out and go
style.
see her. Jail just works totally differently at this time period of the late 19th century.
Well, another thing that'll become a little bit more prevalent as we get into this story is that you might read the story and go like, Jesus Christ, like how did this guy just bribe and talk himself out of every situation? But to that point about how everything was so unorganized, and like whoever was after him or onto him at any point was miles away in another town, like he was actively just plundering so much money from these weird bank robberies and shit he would do, and paying off people who were just cogs in the machine and didn't give a shit that much. So you could, if you had all that money on hand, probably just fucking buy your way out of jail, talk your way out of jail. You're talking to somebody who doesn't give them much of his shit to begin with. There's stories about him, like, when he was a kid in jail the first time, reading, Marx, like, just reciting it to someone in the jail next to him.
As you do.
And then he hears the jailer stop, or, like, he's walking, and he's like, oh, shit. And the guy goes, no, keep going, because he's just, like, interested in it.
Hey, Fitzy, let me tell you how many strands of linen it takes to make a sweater. Wait till you hear this. Dude, how could you tell anyone about, like, capital and wrap them in stories?
No, it was the Communist Manifesto.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's much snappier.
That is snappier, that's true.
I guess that would be crazy to try to read Capital.
But that's a great point, though, in that he was... what he was actively doing along the lines of organizing workers and organizing for the party, he was also, his main role was he was just like a mob boss. He would show up places, get to know the entire underground circuit of wherever he was living, and then he would conduct robberies and steal thousands and thousands of rubles and then send them away to either Lenin or whoever his made man is at the time. And he, to his credit, didn't keep much of it or party with it.
Yeah, it was in function. It was a mob. It was a mafia operation. Like, that was what it was. Like, he had the same job as a capo, a high level capo in like the Black Hand in the same time in the United States. Like the 5 Points and the Lower East Side thing. Those guys, those early mob guys, same time period. The Castellammarise guys. The Mustache Pete's who got overthrown by Luciano, they're doing the exact same thing, but they're just doing it for the party. They're robbing banks. They're doing protection rackets.
That's a big part of
it. That's a huge part of it. Like, everybody's got to pay for security. They're kidnapping people, rich people. That's all under the purview of traditional mob operations.
Well, that's why he's such an interesting figure to me, because he is sort of a fusion between what could just be like a tool. He could just be an organized criminal, but he also is this Marxist crusader who believes in the cause. So
that's the thing that he says, is Montefiore says, is the thing that's made Stalin so unique, is that he was a thug, but he was also a classically trained and, like, very elevated and intelligent person. And
he was singing the whole time.
He one of the kind of counter narratives he tries to push against is the Trotskyist notion that Stalin was a total mediocrity and like a thick-headed peasant, and he argues, I think, pretty convincingly that was Trotsky's inherent snobbery.
Yeah.
Well, snobbery. Like, he was a huge fucking snob. He looked down on anybody who he didn't feel like as educated as he was, and he's kind of like his evaluation of Stalin is the one that is won out, and this is saying no, he was actually really, like, smart. He was a good poet. He was an actual theorist, if it wasn't at, like, the level of Lenin or whatever. And then he combined that with being just a fucking thug.
Yeah, and he synthesized the two things into what
that's
was
praxis, baby.
Yeah, was uniquely going to work in this specific time and place in regards to what he felt he needed to do in order to support Lenin. And so he both, was a person who was oriented towards the cause, but then also very much like formed this thing called the Outfit, which was the fucking Expendables. It was an action movie ragtag group of crazy people who probably didn't have the ideological thing that he had.
Yeah,
he had to corral them and sort of explain to them why they were doing what they were doing.
He was a gang leader. That's why. So Harry Turtledove does these really nerdy alternative history books and stories where he's like, "What if the Allies? What if the Confederacy had won the war?" That kind of thing. And I've read an embarrassing amount of it. And he once wrote a story where the premise was, "What if there had been a Soviet revolution in the United States instead of in 1917? What if there had been a Bolshevik party that took power during World War I in the U.S. instead of in Russia?"
Oh, I can't imagine.
And the person who ends up taking power is not like John Reed or Eugene Debs or Big Bill Haywood. It's Al Capone.
Oh, cool.
Because it's like that was in Turtledove's mind the equivalent of Stalin.
Sure.
Syphilis rules.
A mob guy.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to, Jake, your point earlier about how there's this kind of inherent tension between Marxism and liberalism, where liberals have this attachment to sort of great man theory, or I guess great person theory, where history moves forward through the actions.
Great
of
person theory, Anders. It's 2019.
Great they theory.
Great they them theory. And Marxism, the other end of that, is like, no, you have to look at the material forces, individuals more or less irrelevant, and yeah, neither one of those is totally true. But there are material forces that shape a persona and people's decisions and things like that. I don't know if we're getting this, but like when he takes power, that is a really interesting sort of phase, because he had kind of, in Lenin's view, screwed some stuff up in Georgia, because there was he tried to annex Georgia when they wanted independence, and then he's already kind of on the rocks with Lenin, but he is ordered to only work for 10 minutes a week, which he's like very incensed about, and he calls up Lenin's wife, Krupskaya.
This guy working for WeWork.
But
WeWork.
But he just freaks out
WeWork.
at Lenin's wife, and in Montefiore's words, outrages Lenin's bourgeois sentiments. I don't know if that's his projection, but he says, to sleep with Lenin does not mean you understand Marxist-Leninism. Just because you use the same toilet as Leninism, and then he just like goes
That's
on
right.
and on.
Stalin is canceled, yo.
He says that he warns her if she doesn't obey, then the Central Committee will appoint someone else as Lenin's wife, and that like almost does him in. So
it really does, and it's an amazing lack of discipline, because the whole reason he was able to take power is because he was able to wait to the right moment and restrain himself. Not like Trotsky, who was just nutting everywhere all the time. He was kept his powder dry, but here that was still very much up in the air at that point. It was not determined. It was not in any way determined that he was going to be the guy who succeeded Lenin, because Lenin. But then he wrote that fucking letter, like he was so close to it, and he just lost composure to write this like letter that just led to like, yeah, I will fucking end your shit.
Well, that's
I don't
what's
fucking care.
That's what's so interesting about this as a biography. If you just want to look at it coldly and ahistorically, is just like, why is this person this way? If you want to look at him through the lens of like a serial killer or something like that, like the guy was so compartmentalized that he was able to become so sociopathic and just like kill in just such scientific, like clean ways. But the part of him that was all of his humanity was dumped into was the ideological stuff. So he could kill 10 people in a row and then like just not keep his mouth shut about this fucking thing, you know?
Right, and he also just openly disrespects women. Found a fantastic tweet earlier this week that is from May, but if you
Stalin?
No, it's from a tanky teen who is standing for Stalin but now reading into him. And it was submitted for a take of the decade, and it says, I looked up at the age difference for Stalin and his wife, and I gotta say, our king shouldn't have a 21-year gap, and now I really don't know how to feel.
He's Keanu.
Oh, he's canceled, sis. And that is the samovar of tea.
Drink your samovar. Yeah, I mean, if you have a problem with his second wife, you should see the 13-year-old he marries in exile.
Oh!
We'll get there.
Oh, boy.
We'll get there. We're kind of all over the place. But we're at the part now where my man is doing made man crimes. He's
La
protection
Cosa
rackets.
Nostra, baby.
He's defying the law of the West. And
Mob candy.
the book opens on this great scene in 1907 where he's doing a robbery in Tiflis, and it's his one last straw. And this is where we kind of meet his crew, the outfit. It's him.
Soso's 11.
I'm not going to have the names because, again, frankly, I did not realize we were doing an episode on this when I was reading it. But it's him. It's like a few femme fatales who all have like pistols and they're like leggings.
Garters, yeah.
There are 3 young women that are part of his gang that operate like as these hot young women that charm police and shit, and then smuggle the money around in their like bras
and their
panties
bustles
and shit,
such,
and like have dynamite in their cleavage and stuff.
Yeah,
it fucking rules.
They all rule. He has a kick-ass team of people who all deserve their own biographies, but unfortunately, they are all overshadowed by his right-hand man, whose name is Camo, and is just a psychopath.
Camo's a wild man.
Camo fucking rules. He's got one blind eye leading into the Tiflis bank heist because he was just fiddling with bombs and blew one of his eyeballs up because he's like the bomb guy on the A-team or whatever.
He's the Joker.
Yeah.
But yeah, if this is the A-team, he would be Howlin' Mad Murdoch.
Right.
100%.
And he is at the forefront of all Operation Stalin does. So if you're going to be killed by Stalin, Stalin's not going to kill you. He has a bum arm. He's going to send this psychopath Camo after you, who's going to choke you in front of your family.
Apparently, whenever Stalin would get into a public argument with a fellow communist on a question of tactics or theory, Camo would just say, "Let me slit his throat.
Let me kill him for you.
Let me kill him for you.
So.
I can kill him. You want me to kill him? It's like, hey, I will kill him for you."
My drive to kill, it strikes again. The book opens with them doing this bank heist, kind of botching it.
It's sort of a Super Mario Brothers style. They literally just hurl bombs like you're trying to blow up Donkey Kong.
They blow up. They have these grenades they call apples, and they're launching them at this cart that is drawn by horses that's carrying all the money from the bank, which is, I mean, you could just reimagine this. You could rewrite this as some dumb David Clooney or George Clooney fucking bank heist thing where it's an armored car.
Yeah.
It's a horse-drawn carriage.
But they're not going for any of that subtlety where, we're going to sneak in, and I'm going to pretend to be a cop, and I'm going to get the key. And no, we'll just throw bombs and kill everyone around there.
It's exactly how I play Metal Gear Solid, because I'm not good at all the sneaking. I'm like, you gave me grenades. I'm going to throw them at the horse.
Yeah, it's like you're just going 5-star GTA out of the bat. Just fuck this.
Because, again, help is not coming. It's hundreds of miles away.
The grenades blow up like the horse's stomach.
Yeah.
that's dragging the cart. The horse collapses. They go to try to get the money. The horse like freaks out, has an adrenaline rush, and comes back to life and starts running away.
Drags all the
with
money
the fucking
away.
money. And then this hilarious shit happens where one of them is chasing the money
and
that's getting
he
away.
rolls a bomb like he's doing Super Mario Kart.
Yeah.
And then he just rips the guts out of the fucking horse.
But the best part to me was when they're chasing the getaway banged up like money cart thing, and a police officer running past them stops them and goes, "Do you know where the bank robbers are?" They're like, "Yeah, they're back there." And the police officer goes, "Thanks for the heads up," and runs back into town, not realizing he just talked to the bank robber. The police officer kills himself the next day.
Oh,
I should have known it was the beautiful women.
Realizing how bad he got owned.
You got fucking owned.
He logs off forever.
You got owned, courtesy of Stalin.
This is a great thing to frame this book around. It was a good idea because you'd lead up all the way to how the
It
fuck
was
you get
also
here.
a huge deal at the time. It was like worldwide news.
It was 1 billion rubles, or $4 US.
It ended up causing huge strife within the Social Democratic Party.
Right.
Helped contribute to the final split between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks.
Yeah.
Well, this is the opening for the book because it's how Stalin gets in with Lenin, is with all of this money.
Lenin loves this shit.
The thing about Lenin is,
he's like a gangster.
He loves his books,
He's like
but-
Kevin Spacey in Baby Driver.
Yes, yes. There's nothing he likes better than that sweet, sweet cheese. It
Gotta let
dictates
old
everything.
Vladimir wet his beak. Gotta give me a taste.
Gonna need a little bit of that Vladimir cheddar.
Oh, yeah. Give it to me.
Yeah. So he gets all this stuff. He's finally in with Lenin, and now he can become officially part of the big meetings that happen
The Central Committee.
in the CC.
That's the real hardcore. If you were in the Central Committee at that point, you either ended up getting killed by Stalin or Stalin. That's basically it.
Yeah.
There were a couple like house-trained boys that he broke, like Molotov, but basically everybody he was in the early
Molotov was just his butler for life.
Anybody who else was in that Central Committee, they got owned.
Yeah. I think Kollontai survived.
Yes,
She
She's like
did.
exiled
She's the
or
one.
something.
She's a boss. Oh, fun anecdote from the book. showing off the differences between Stalin and Trotsky is Kollontai is fucking this young sailor man during the revolution, and is supposedly the last time they ever made small talk. Is they're like essentially watching it behind a curtain, and Stalin's nudging Trotsky in the side and be like, you like this? This is pretty fun. And Trotsky's like, it's not fucking funny, and she is a beautiful woman that I respect. And then they never spoke again.
That fucking rules.
At the end of the day, Trotsky was absolutely a fucking nerd. He was he was just the class fucking brown-nosing, telling your teacher that they forgot the homework, fucking grind-ass, Tracy Flick-ass nerd.
He's a nerd, and he's just right enough of the time that back then you had to be nice to him.
And then eventually they're like, Stalin's like, hey, who do you want to hang around with? You want to hang around with some fucking dork who's going to correct your pronunciations of things and listen to classical music? Or me, party dude, Stalin, hang out, I'll drink some Georgian wine, watch fucking cowboy movies. What sounds more fun? And people were like, hell yeah. Sign me up.
I'll recite poetry, which is rap at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, Trotsky's like, excuse me, we need to go through the minutes again.
Let's get our grammar correct. The first rule of our new country: no nerds.
There was in the Trotsky the Isaac Berliner Trotsky biography I read, which is very good, highly recommended. There was apparently a moment after the Soviet Union had been established where Trotsky was, driving hard his staff and all the other guys, and anybody who fucked up or didn't complete an assignment just got berated. And apparently he was just yelling at fucking Molotov one day, and Molotov just goes, "But Comrade Trotsky, not everyone can be a genius."
Fuck off. Such a fun. Even to be a historical nerd is really just like a terrible title to have. Back to this robbery, though. This is especially big because, and this is a huge part of understanding the development of the SDs. They had a rule because this happened so much that they were done doing robberies, and everyone voted, and it was before this big one with the grenades, and that's kind of what puts Lenin on the outs, because he suddenly shows up with a lot of money all of a sudden, and they all know where he got it. Mm-hmm. From the fucking robbery they're reading about in Britain, half a world away.
Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, they just mag dumped a bunch of cartoon bombs into a public place. Just shredded the fuck out of 40 people.
A ton of people died, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 2 blocks away from where his wife and kid lived. And he didn't tell them.
Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah, I think this is as good a time as any to get into kind of his personal romantic life.
Ooh, baby.
So as we were saying,
he was a player.
He's being a real playboy the whole time, but the people who get close to him do not have a great time of it, because it turns out once you let this cunning mob boss into your life, he actually doesn't pay much attention to you. His first wife, Kato, who apparently he really loved, bears him a child, and he takes her to Baku on this organizing mission, which is this industry town run by the Rothschilds. And it was
basically Barter Town.
It
Baku
just looks like
is so
Mordor.
funny.
Yeah.
It's just on fire. There's temples and shit still.
It's the set of Eraserhead.
There's temples where there's just oil fires, and the people worship the oil fires.
Yeah.
Which is just old-timey Game of Thrones shit, and yet here comes industry to just fast-forward everything a million years at a time. And, the people that strike it rich on this oil are able to amass so much wealth that they are building these homes, these mansions are all competing with each other, where they're just one guy's house is just in the shape of a deck of cards where the letters on the cards spell out his name and shit. One guy's fucking mansion, the front door is just a dragon's mouth that you walk through. This fucking kicks ass. But it's also a Black Magic the Gathering card where
it's swamps.
It's evil.
It's for sure swamps.
It's deeply decadent and vile. It's a culture, an absolute nadir of anything civilized.
And it's before they really understood that, they did have the concept of the black town and the white town, which is the black town being where the oil is, I think, in the white town where maybe you're still separate of it. But they weren't separate enough from the toxic thing they were mining. So
the entire town was above a glue factory, as Jake's apartment is above a glue factory. Everyone got extra old-timey diseases, and even being there for a few months, his wife gets so sick that they try to transport her back to Tiflis, where she's from, and she immediately immediately like fucking explodes of mega cancer.
She gets old.
She is fucking
She
old
is fucking old.
by the revolution.
Yeah, sorry, lady. We had to take you to Baku.
And so she has a child with him, and it's like
Yakov.
who is a few years old, and Stalin essentially looks it in the eyes and is like, have a good one.
Yeah, good luck.
I'm trying
Smell
again.
you later. I'm gonna go do some revolution.
I need to go write poetry about
Peace.
being emo now.
But there is a famous incident where at the funeral of his beloved Kato, he said, apparently, this is the last tenderness of my stony heart is like left or something. It's like he basically said, I'm going to be the bad guy from now on.
I will be bad now.
Yeah, I am bad man now. I
And
don't
then-
like humans. They are bad for me.
This is where, in the way that
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
biography is written, there is like an act turn. This is where you go into, I guess you would describe maybe Act 2, or because it's written in 5 parts, maybe literally Act 3 or whatever.
I
But
believe it says with her dies my last warm feelings for humanity.
very
That's what he
deliberately presented as being arguably when he
said. No, that's
just,
some Lex Luthor shit.
yeah.
Like-
He's like Mr. Freeze watching his wife
yeah,
die.
exactly. It's like this is like Thanos level shit.
Yeah.
Like the
Except
self
he
consciousness
killed
of
her.
this.
Yeah, and it's like I maybe think the writer here is taking some artistic license, but also entirely possible that
I will
is-
say that I have seen that quote in many, many accounts. That is apparently an accepted quote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people just talked like
now
that.
the question people have about is whether he was being full of shit and just using it as an excuse. Like, oh no, I guess I have to be a piece of shit now.
I have
Sure.
to keep
When in real
doing
reality,
crime.
it's like, yes, I get to keep doing crime. And the support for that is that there's another quote in the book where, he's in one of his exiles in Siberia. He says, we have to stay an underground organization until the revolution, which is good because otherwise we have to be normal people. Like he admits that, like, I'm not built for a civilian life.
Well, I mean,
Which is how he ends up being like in charge of this like massive state, but the organs of the state are like a fucking mob boss.
Oh, one final detail on the funeral before we move on is he says this emotional quote, and then the cops come and he has to hop a fence and get out of there.
yeah, he's
He was like one of the Duke boys.
Yeah.
He was always just ahead of Boss Hogg and his guys.
So cello house.
he has to ditch. He has to jump the cart over the canyon or whatever. Yeah, it was very funny that he had to ditch
Just a
out
good old
his-
boy. Wait a minute, is it Dukes of Hazzard? That's in Georgia, right?
That is a
Oh
Georgia.
shit!
Boom.
Holy
Oh, my
shit.
God.
It's Kismet.
Yeah, we connected the universes
Yes.
of Dukes of Hazzards and Al Bundy.
Yeah.
In
through
this essay, I will prove. This would be my thesis statement. It's the same Georgia, but
Yeah, just real quick, one more thing about the biographical nature of the way the story is told and this moment of him supposedly losing his innocence. I think maybe it does kind of speak to him being a stunted person in that he, watched his wife die, maybe did lose the last of his innocence, and then decided, well, now, yeah, I can just lean full force into being.
He
this
turned to his
weird-
friend and said, I think I'm going to become the Joker.
Yeah, for real. It is like a parallel with the third act of like a human male's life in a lot of ways, where he's entering like divorced guy era, I think, in his life.
Oh, yeah.
well, he signs all of his essays with his dead wife's name. He's going and doing poetry in her name. I think, is this when he becomes a weatherman? I don't know. He's still out doing bachelor shit.
I forgot he
But
was a
then he
weatherman.
becomes sort of like he takes a Last Tango in Paris style approach to his grief by just having tons of sex.
Oh yeah. I mean, he is clearly mourning, but also still a sociopathic, horny guy,
The beast needs to feed. Dog gotta eat.
which I would argue he's ahead of his time. Because you can totally be that.
The morning can make you horny. And so, he dives into his work. He becomes very powerful in the organization. He becomes part of the CC. And this is where we see the only moment that makes me question whether his wife's dying is like impactful and his change into a cold bastard is he has like 6 of those moments in this book.
Yeah.
Every time he goes to jail, he's like, and then after this jail, I became post-jail Stalin.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's hard to really suss out whether it's the narrative or whether he literally only felt it that
And
hard
then
with
you have
the one wife.
amazing reality that Stalin, because of the absolute control he was able to exercise over that country once he took power, he had 25 years to try to literally edit the history of his life. Like he was
He had to
able
delete all of his
he was
tweets.
able to go in there and like take like there's a bunch of stories in the footnotes of this about people having documents and photographs and diaries that are just confiscated by the secret police during the terror. So you literally got to edit like the historical record of his youth.
Yeah, that's why this story is so interesting, because the way it's sourced is it's told in spite of that.
Yeah.
So this is also only, whatever the fuck they were able to cite. And
apparently a lot of it is that they were able to get memoirs, because a lot of people who knew Stalin when he was, the guy, they wrote memoirs about their relationships with him that they never released because, the boss didn't want them to be.
It was a bad time to release.
Yeah, and so, but they've been found since.
Save to draft.
They've been found subsequently in, records. So these are the first time that they're being used, according to him.
Yeah.
So that's what we're getting here is, the details, because, one of the reasons he went down, because Trotsky says that, during the 1905 revolution, he was pushing papers somewhere, and it's like, no, he was funding a fucking newspaper by fucking kidnapping and brigandage,
wanton
and
murder,
being a literal highwayman,
being a pirate sometimes.
Yeah, basically, literally piracy. He fucking he hijacks at least two boats, two tanker ships. Yeah.
The other big character-defining moment that Montefiore obsesses on is when he is getting further involved in the CC and he's moving up the ranks. He has more of a relationship doing police espionage because the Okhrana, which is the Tsarist police at the time, who are the FBI of the fucking emperor or whatever, a very basic form of anti-intelligence, are just all over his organization. So his main job, and the reason he's valuable to Lenin, is he can sniff out a rat. And so he develops a super paranoid personality that informs every decision he makes for the rest of his life.
I mean, there's a whole question about the degree to which there would have had to have been violence directed against the apparatus of the party after the collectivization of agriculture. I mean, the idea being that, Stalin made the choice that Trotsky wasn't willing to make, right? To make the omelet of an industrial, competitive Soviet Union by breaking the eggs of the peasantry, right?
Specifically from places who slighted him
exactly.
30 years ago.
Yeah. Right. And so...
From the town of that guy, Greg, who pissed me off 13 years ago.
So Stalin's willing to make that deal. But so to have the state carry out this mass expropriation of surplus agricultural product to create these, industrial hell cities that can make up the gap difference between Russia and the West.
Right.
You're going to engender a lot of hostility to the state carrying this out. And the purges could be read. They are, of course, part of his paranoia. But they could also be read as a strategy of diffusing resentment, popular resentment of the state as itself. Because the first round of some of the first terror rounds were people who were blamed for the initial deaths in Ukraine. There's this famous essay that Stalin published in the state organs called "Dizzy with Success," where he says, people went a little too far in Ukraine, and he basically sells out the people who had carried out his orders there.
I have a list of some of these people.
And so, you could read the terror as basically the system self-sacrificing over the necessary crime,
right?
Of agricultural industrialization.
The part that makes it look so bad,
that we're sacrificing the people who carried that out on the altar, having carried it out.
Sure.
Do you think, though, that the new economic program could have been continued in a way that would be sustainable and maybe go to socialism, or that they just needed some more big structural change?
See, here's the thing: is that I feel like
big structure
is that my real belief about the Soviet Union is that they were in a Kobayashi Maru. As soon as the revolutionary wave crested after 1918, without any of the other big countries going left, I feel like they were at a Kobayashi Maru, where they were not going to be able to find a good answer to anything, because the entire theory of skipping all the steps and skipping the first stage and skipping the bourgeois revolution in Russia was Lenin's idea, which he got from Trotsky, about permanent revolution and about the creation of being the spark that lights a world revolution that then says, well, we don't have to develop capitalism because we can humanely develop our economy with the aid of all these advanced Western countries that are going to go revolutionary as soon as we do. And that was the premise by which they carried out the revolution. And then it looked for a minute like it was going to happen. Once the Kiel garrisons go into mutiny in Germany and stuff, and then that spreads to the Inverness, and even there's widespread rebellion in Hungary. There's a Soviet and there's a Soviet in Munich, and there's risings in Berlin. It looks like it's going to happen. And then it doesn't. The wave crests, partially because, as I said, these more advanced societies had more advanced middle classes that had co-opted a lot of the working class energy and directed it against revolution, like is what happened in Germany. And that left the Soviets with an unanswerable question. We are now the pariah state of the world, the pariah dog. Everyone wants to end us. They have every incentive to destroy us because we cannot spread as a concept. As we are an existential threat to their order. So what do? We can either negotiate terms of surrender to capital, which I think keeping the NEP would have been eventually. There would have been a slow sort of negotiation of surrender to capital, which would have left the actual Soviets maybe Bolsheviks maybe in a decent position. Like they might have been able to negotiate good severances or positions in the new government or whatever. But I feel like that would have been an inevitable result of supercharging capitalism in that incredibly peasant society. The other option was to try to compete directly as an economic power to prevent being eventually overcome by capital, and that meant supercharging industry. And the only way you do that historically is by wringing it out of the labor of the peasants. And then that was the choice that basically they were left with unless they wanted to surrender the concept of a communist Soviet Union.
Do you think that Stalin's ideological origins as kind of a Georgian nationalist Marxist played into that decision at all? Do you think it was in his DNA at all to be a little bit of a nation builder?
He loved the homies.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that he started off as a Georgian nationalist, but then his big conflict with Lenin and Trotsky was over his harsh suppression of Georgian nationalism.
Right.
Yeah.
What
would his
he
Facebook
kind of showed
quiz
that
say?
it didn't
Would
really
it say-
matter. He didn't care.
Yeah, fair.
At the end of the day, he didn't really care about the Georgian shit. Like, as soon as his position of power moved from the periphery to the metropole, he was like, yeah, fuck him.
Okay, yeah. I guess I was imagining it as him having just switched out. Oh, now I'm a Russian nationalist or whatever.
Yeah,
But
you're a fucking
right.
Russian
He
nationalist.
switched ideologically.
Anders, what would the Facebook quiz say?
Yeah. Would it be Georgian nationalist, Marxist, Leninist? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, if that was a Facebook quiz. We can only wonder.
But, like, the reason Stalin was the guy who ended up being in the position to pull the trigger on what needed to be done if you're going to assume the existence of a Soviet Union that was going to be viable, he had to be a mob guy because nobody else is going to have the stomach to do it.
Right.
And he loved being one.
Yeah. Nobody
It
else
was
is going to
his
have the
whole
stomach for that.
freaking
Because, like,
thing.
Trotskyism, the defining nature of Trotskyism was Trotskyism, the obsession with internationalism in Trotskyism is born out of the failure of that revolution to happen. And then the refusal to accept the material reality of turning Russia into an advanced country. They couldn't, because like the thing that was going to fix that is, well, you just hook up with these advanced societies that now are communist, and they're going to help us out, and then we don't have to do the bad, awful thing that all the capitalist countries did to get there. It just
Right.
took over a longer time, and most of it was done in colonial countries, so it didn't even feel as much like violence because the people
It was happening to somebody else.
It's happening to somebody else. It's
Yeah, it's like written out of their history.
yeah,
and stuff
exactly.
like that.
It's like, and then he was the one who was willing to fucking do it.
Right. It's a mob guy.
But Trotsky
Everyone look away.
Trotsky was always saying, "Well, hold on a minute. We'll basically kick the can down the road and argue about it until the world revolution happens and saves us from this conversation." Right. But Stalin was the guy who was saying, "The world revolution is not walking through that door. We got to deal with this situation as it exists."
All right,
But what
Anders,
about-
we'll do more counterfactuals
Okay.
in the next episode. Let me
Sure,
wrap
sure,
this
sure.
one up.
Okay.
So we got let's just cover two more things, and that'll pretty much cover the book because we are very post-revolution here. So the paranoia from looking out for spies is another theory of the author, and then the last big transformative moment he has. So he has all these young girlfriends the whole time. As he gets older, he develops his taste, which is I like a woman who is either very dumb or a child, because then I can kind of dunk on her all day.
Yeah.
And so he gets all these girlfriends who are like 16 or 17, and then finally he's sent to jail for like the 500th time. And every other time he's gone to jail, they'll send him to essentially like a camp. Like a sleepaway camp where you go there and then you literally get like a fake ID like you're in college and you put on a mustache and you're like, I am actually Victor.
Yeah. All you had to do,
Slimovich.
the only question was how long it took you to either raise the money in exile or to have the money wired to you, because it costs like 75 rubles. If you had 75 rubles, you could escape whenever you wanted.
And he was great at getting money out of people. This guy had so many GoFundMes.
There's like two things about that. There's like always a weird RA, just like local cop who's just like, my job is just to police the weird people that live here. They called that one guy the cock because he was like a
The river cock.
Yeah,
the river cock, yeah.
He was just a ridiculous, like, kind of goofy villain character to
Right,
the
and Stalin
the
would be
campers.
in jail and would just like get in physical fights
Yeah.
with the policemen who were in charge of him, and that was just a thing you could do.
There's also this quote, I can't remember who it was pulled from in the book, but about this situation, which is that, like, if someone didn't leave exile within a few months, they just didn't want to.
They didn't want to
Yeah,
because
right.
you could walk
Yes.
out.
Yeah. It was,
Even when they put him in Siberia, he eventually walked out.
yeah, Trotsky rode a reindeer.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, that fucking nerd was able to escape from jail.
Yeah, in the
That's how
lamest
easy it
way
was.
possible.
Yeah.
Like Santa Claus.
It's like Santa Claus for books. So eventually, the state realizes who this guy is, and that he's gotten away from them 10 times. So he's like, okay, the only way we can get rid of Soso is if we send him to the North Pole. So they send him up to the corner of the Arctic Circle, and this is where Montefiore argues he is changed for the last time before the revolution and becomes affected by the elements because it is so cold there that it drenches into your soul. It's at this point he develops his spiciest take of the book, 13-year-old wife who bears him 2 children. Her name is Lydia Peregrinina. Let me see if I can get the name of the town. I don't know. I don't fucking remember the name of it. It's like Zierkonsk or something. It's one of those things where it's like, it is a name too cold to say.
Okay, 3-act gritty superhero story, right? The end of the first act is his wife dying and him losing his humanity. End of second act is him becoming pedophile Santa Claus. Preparing himself entirely for what he's about to do next.
But this is my favorite part of the entire story because he's already this hardened mob man who is just being crushed by the cold, and he's in the Arctic Circle in a town with like 15 people because nobody wants to live there.
No, it's awful.
There's the Tungus indigenous tribesmen, and they're the only one there. And he shows up along with like 2 other criminals because that's just where the state is sending these people because it's too far away to come home. And he just immediately goes in and shacks up with the 13-year-old. So the family hates him, and he just comes at home every night from like killing reindeer for meat and then just disappears with the daughter, and then they have to like eat with him at dinner. And it's wildly uncomfortable, and he's there for 2 years.
This
or
is
something.
why I'm
He's a
saying,
bad boy.
This is why I think he has divorced guy energy, because the shit that he's doing early in his life is eccentric and kind of forgiving of a young wacko artist, but the older you get and you keep doing a lot of this shit and also like suspiciously just dating women that are the same age
He's
as
in
your
his
ex,
30s at this point.
this
yeah.
is getting to the point where it's like, all right, guy needs to go to therapy or like quit his hobby or whatever. His analogous, modern character would be a much more sad person, I think.
He's Marxist in the streets, libertarian in the sheets. And that's where he's getting these young, hot girls.
Oh, fair. I see what you did there.
But that, but see, this is the beauty of being the lumpen proletarian that he was. Like, that's the thing about Stalin, is that he never really was a working class guy. You know, he worked for like a minute with his dad's shoe company when his dad was like, "Come and be the cobbler."
Yeah, you read shoe.
He was lumpen proletarian. Like that was his deal. He was like outside of the working class, just an unorganized lump of criminal shiftlessness. He didn't have the discipline and like social order drilled into him by labor, because that's the thing in Marx. Labor is the disciplinary tool that is necessary, because you got to turn people into like human beings, basically. Right. You have to have them be civilized in the ways of like a society, like to respect other people and like others' experience. And like to Marx, working in being a member of the working class gives you that experience. If you're outside of it, if you're outside of, the cash relationships and you're making money, in prostitution or criminality like this, that just it's a pathology, because there's no discipline involved. You're not learning how to be a person amongst other people. You assume everything as a transaction, and that has to be disciplined out of you by actually working. And Stalin never did.
No, although he is permanently affected by just being in this Arctic hell where people will go out to hunt, as people do in this region, as it's the only way to get food. There's no civilization.
Jesus.
And then one or two of the members won't come back because they wandered into the wrong part of the snowdrift, and everyone is just fine with it. And he carries that kind of mentality on for the rest of his life. So eventually he gets his papers and finally gets out of there. And when the government completely collapses during World War I, and there's just no effort to keep anyone in exile anymore, he's allowed to just leave.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't really have absorbed, especially people who want to translate, Bolshevik theories of power into modern America, is that like after World War I started and this medieval-ass society tried to fight a fucking modern technical war, the whole thing basically fell apart completely, almost immediately. Like the roads and railroads were just choked with deserting soldiers, taking their entire kits and firearms and going back home. Like that was what defined the whole thing. Like people just walking away from their employments in the state, and people in the cities turning into just absolute riots of labor disruption and strikes. Like everything, the gears basically fell off.
Yeah,
it was not a functioning society basically by the time that the February Revolution happened.
If you're organized, you can make any kind of government you want from fucking this. You know, there is no.
That
order.
Is really true. Like the Soviets won out for largely the reason that they were the most disciplined and organized party existing at that moment. Everyone else was to some degree either committed to a state that was on life support, like diffuse in their motives, or just hopelessly paralyzed by indecision, like the Mensheviks and the SRs. Like even like at that moment, what looked most likely was there was going to be a right-wing coup, which would have succeeded, and honestly, if the Bolsheviks hadn't been there, would have happened eventually. But even on the right, like who is going to be in charge of it? That was never settled. They never had a unified.
They had no plan.
They had no plan. There was no counter-revolutionary, like reactionary response coordinated at the high levels of the aristocracy and the military.
It was violent Mario Party.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Kornilov coup that like really gave the Soviets or the Bolsheviks like the credibility leading into October. Nobody to this day really knows if that was coordinated or not, or if it was just a mistaken, like one weird guy like misinterpreting fucking telegrams. Like nobody knows if it even really happened. So there was no real organized counter revolutionary tide, and that's why, with everybody else being either paralyzed or unorganized, the Bolsheviks just, to use a sports metaphor, they wanted it more.
They wanted it. You got to show up and get it. At the end of the day, it's all about the off season, and that's what it's all about.
But the reason everyone else was so weak and divided is because there was no organized middle class that had created like a real buffer zone of like people who to fill these positions. It was all skeleton crews. And so it was just so brittle and easy to knock over, as opposed to in Western Europe where, by that point, the Industrial Revolution had been going on for almost 100 years. It had developed these very rich networks of sort of middle-class diffusion of cultural values and also co-optation materially of members of the working class. which never happened in Russia.
You could work at BuzzFeed in Germany at the time.
Basically, yes. Like, that was a job. Like, coffee house fucking grad student was a job in Germany. It was not really a job in the Soviet Union.
So I'm just going to wrap this up real quick. But so essentially he gets back and all of the 1917 revolution stuff you've heard about 1,000 times happens. But what the book emphasizes is that Stalin as a guy was personally pretty much unknown on a major level for the Bolshevik Party. Like, people knew Trotsky because he was a rock star nerd.
Oh, no, yeah. He was the king pimp.
People knew Lenin because he had that great shiny head.
He was the man.
Yeah, but Stalin's main asset was as Lenin's second in command, who could disappear him at a moment's notice when he launched a failed coup and everyone was trying to kill him. He put a hat and shaved his beard and is like, "Your name is Sam now," and then he gave him those skills and. That carried on for the rest of his career.
It makes sense as to why that his legacy is so confusing, because if you're a famous spy, you're doing it wrong.
Yes.
So, yeah, of course he got propped right up after.
Trotsky was the Austin Powers of the revolution.
But then he won. One of the big things it boils down to is that Stalin beat Trotsky because he could lay in the cut and Trotsky couldn't. Trotsky was Mr. Plumage. He was the war commissar. He was the guy who won the Civil War. He was the guy people were worried about carrying out a Bonapartist coup because he had his boast of power in the military. Stalin, because he had a position in the party apparatus and not in the actual military, he looked much less threatening. And of course, he didn't have a public profile. Meanwhile, the actual job he had as general secretary was to stock the political appointments at every level of the party, like in the labor unions and in the party apparatus, to stock the actual staff. He was in charge of HR basically, which meant that when it was time to start voting, large chunks of these committees were controlled by people that he had handpicked for the job.
Right.
A made man through and through.
Yes.
The Irishman.
The Irishman,
I haven't
directed
seen the
by Martino Scorsese. Check it out. Anyway, that's Young Stalin. Young Stalin.
Young.
Oh, the Young Stalin.
The
for
hot
sure.
man you know today.
He's a rapper.
If you're interested in the story,
poet.
check out the book because there are a million details we didn't get to, but it is fucking fantastic.
Before we wrap up, I just want to rattle through a few details that I had made notes of in my head.
Oh yeah, there are a few good ones.
Just details, but as I was reading this book, I was just like, this is the funniest shit ever. This should be a movie. It should be a dumb fucking action comedy. Detail number one. In Baku, that town where all the oil came from, where everything's on fire and shit. One of the oil tycoons who built a competitive house to try to have a big mansion, and Big Dick, the other guys, tried to cover his mansion in gold, and they had to talk him out of it and get him to replace it with gold plating because the heat from the oil fires would melt his house.
I want the chocolate house.
I can't build you a candy house. The sun will melt the candy. Not if it never rains.
And another one was that when Stalin was on the come up, and when he was first meeting with Lenin and becoming this arm of Lenin's in the underground or whatever, he was traveling very clandestinely on trains and planes and things like that, and he took a boat at one point, and the boat was shipwrecked, but not before a fight broke out on it. And just as another note, boat was full of clowns. So he was on a clown boat.
Did I mention the boat was full of clowns?
It was full of clowns.
Anders was there.
And an entire fight broke out. And the guy writing in the footnotes, the author of this book, just kind of goes, look, I can't really in good faith tell you that he fought with the clowns, but we can
just imagine it. Have fun. Have fun with Stalin.
History tells us
we can make some assumptions.
He probably fought a clown.
You know what I bet he did? It was like, I'll let you live if you make me laugh.
Yeah.
One by one, they had to
just
try
killed
and get
him.
a chuckle out of him, or they died.
I don't know, just weird shit like that. Read the fuck out of this book. It's so funny.
Check out books. All right, and that's our Young Stalin episode. Do we want to plug anything, Matt? Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
If anyone's in the UK, we still got tickets to our shows in London and Liverpool right before the general election, baby. Jez is going to do it. It's going to be proper mental. It's going to happen, mate. It's Labour, mate. It's going to win it. It's going to be smashing.
Phone Labour.
The absolute boy.
The absolute boy's going to do it. No, I can't. I prepared for my brain to be destroyed the next day, like just atomic weapon level leveling of my cerebral cortex, either out of glee or just savage nihilistic despair. Either way, though, my brain will be a ravaged wasteland.
That's a good plug. Look for Matt's brain and scrape it off the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
it will be just a pile of gunk.
You have 6 days before Matt is dead.
Yeah.
That looks like a Scotch egg.
Yes.
Oh, it's Matt's brain.
It's a bloody curry. It's a big curry.
I'm just going to plug my Twitter on this one, Attack Jokes. I'll put all my stuff on there. Anders, you got anything?
At Anders Lee here on Twitter, and if you are in New York this Saturday and you like stuff like the history of the 20th century and fascism, communism, and eugenics, I'm doing a show about the autistic spectrum.
I
which
do love
a lot of
eugenics.
people don't
You
know.
had me
Or
at
like
eugenics.
learning about eugenics.
You
I
like
gave-
the learning
I
about
was
those
told
things.
if I liked eugenics, I would like this show.
Yeah, I'm trying to round
Finally,
them up, and
something
so they
that
can be
speaks
killed.
to me in the marketplace.
Tell me about the extra bone.
Okay, wait.
I'm doing a show about the autistic spectrum and the history of it, which a lot of people don't realize has a lot to do with fascism and eugenics, but it's a lot of fun. It's going to be Saturday at 8:10 at the Crane Theater in the Village.
Edwin Black, War on the Week.
Go see the show. It's a good show.
Go see Anders' fascist show. Okay. This fascist one-man clown show. No, go see Dummy. It's good. I am going to be in the Southwest all next week doing shows around Phoenix, Tucson, Bisbee, Arizona, if you're out there.
You're going to have some fucking topaz?
I'm going to do some DMT, I think.
That's
And
hopefully.
Probably also buy a bunch of turquoise.
Yeah,
and
get
shit.
that turquoise shit.
and
That's
trip
the real
real hard
shit.
on it. And,
Get a turquoise fucking bolo tie.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to come back a different person, a
Excellent.
Southwestern
You're
meth
going to be a
head.
Taos motherfucker.
Starting a podcast in his mind.
Yeah. I'll be out there, and then I've got shows around New York for the rest of the winter that can be found on my website and my pinned tweet, and I don't really have anything else until early next year. Megabus tour. I won a golden Megabus ticket. They're letting me ride Megabuses for free, so I'm coming everywhere.
He's the king of Megabus.
Yeah.
King of Megabus.
If anybody wants to ride it with me, I
Megabus.
think I can buy extra tickets. I'll take a whole town to another town. I don't know.
Respect your king.
Listen to our show, listen to my other show of Why You Mad, and also sign up for our Patreon for bonus content, extra episodes, all that crap. Patreon.com/. That's it.
All right.
Yeah,
It's finished.
It's finished.
Ka-clam.